It was a quiet summer afternoon when my daughter-in-law tossed my suitcases onto the curb. "This isn't a dumpster. You're the clutter we're clearing out," she announced to our curious neighbours. They just saw a sad family mess. They had no idea that quiet lawn would soon involve lawyers, police, and a secret bank account. The town knew me as the sweet old lady. They were only half right. My name is Eleanor Briggs. I am 67 years old, a widow, and until about 10 minutes ago, I was a resident of this quiet suburban street in Ridgefield, just outside Denver. Now, I'm lawn dressing. My daughter-in-law, Lena, is in the process of cleansing me from the house my son Daniel grew up in. She heaved another cardboard box onto the grass, the tape groaning as it hit the curb. "You just bring clutter." "Eleanor," Lena announced, loud enough for Mrs. Gable 2 houses down to hear through her screen door. In the house, and in our lives, my suitcases, the old Samsonite set my husband Arthur and I took to the Grand Canyon, landed next. I saw the curtains twitch at the Petersons' house across the street. A good show for a Tuesday afternoon. I stood there, numb, but not entirely surprised. I watched my life pile up on the patchy August grass. Lena called it clutter. I saw the worn leather satchel that held my nursing kit for 30 years. I saw a small crate of photo albums, one cover flapping open to show Arthur laughing, his arm around a much younger me. A sheaf of handwritten letters, my mother's recipes spilled from a ripped envelope. Then I saw Lena's foot connect with a grey document box. She kicked it hard, not caring as it skidded under the bumper of Daniel's SUV. My son finally emerged from the house, wiping his hands on his jeans. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Mum," he started, his voice strained with that familiar, weak apology. "Lena's right. It's too much. This is just a transition." He was siding with her, as always, but trying to soften the blow. "It's a step toward that premium care facility we talked about. It's for the best." "Daniel, can we please discuss this inside?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Not on the sidewalk." Lena stepped between us, crossing her arms. She wore expensive yoga pants, though I knew she hadn't seen the inside of a studio in months. "No, we're handling this out here? It's better this way." Better for whom? I wondered. Better for the narrative she was building, the one where I was the confused old woman who couldn't be reasoned with, the one who had to be managed publicly. Mr. Miller, my neighbour to the left, opened his front door. He's 80, maybe older, and walks with a cane. But he started to hobble over, his face pinched with concern. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" Lena didn't even turn. She just shot him a look so sharp, so venomous. It stopped him cold on his own walkway. He hesitated, then retreated inside. I recorded the moment, not with a camera, but in my mind. I watched my own silence, felt my eyes turn cold. Lena then marched back to me, shoving a clear plastic baggie into my hand. It was my weekly pill organizer. "And make sure you take these on time," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "The doctor said your mental state is declining rapidly. You can't afford to miss a dose." She was practically shouting it now, making sure the neighbours heard the key words. Doctor, mental state, declining. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply walked past the growing pile of my clutter and sat down on the bottom concrete step of the porch. My porch. I looked at the patchy lawn, at the box Lena had kicked. The pain was real. a dull ache behind my ribs, but it was mixed with a bitter, simmering clarity. This spectacle wasn't the beginning of my tragedy. It was just the final, ugly push I needed. This was the last straw, the one that validated a plan Lena couldn't possibly imagine. I stared at that grey document box, half hidden in the shadow of the SUV, covered in dust and grass clippings. If Lena had any idea what was actually inside that box, she never would have dared to throw my things out today. She certainly wouldn't have done it on the front lawn. Sitting there on that cold step, my mind drifted back. I wasn't always Clutter. For 35 years, I was Eleanor Briggs, head nurse at Westbrook Care. I knew the sterile scent of a recovery room. I knew medication interactions by heart. And I knew how to read a chart, not just the vitals, but the subtext. I understood the precise, detached language the system uses when an elderly person stops being a human and becomes a case to be managed, a liability to be contained. I had spent my entire career advocating for those patients, fighting to ensure they were seen. It never once occurred to me that I would need to use those same skills to protect myself from my own son. My Daniel. He was my only boy, the kid who used to bury his face in my scrubs when I came home smelling of antiseptic. He was smart, maybe too smart for his own good, and ended up in marketing at a flashy fintech startup called Brightcap. That's where he met Lena. She was some kind of mid-level social media influencer, the type who photographs beige lattes and talks about financial freedom. She'd found Daniel at a wealth builder seminar, and I think she saw him as just another asset to acquire. In the beginning, Lena was all sugar. When they married, she called me Mom. After my grandson, Leo, was born, she was endlessly appreciative. Mom, you're a lifesaver. She'd sigh, dropping Leo off at 7 in the morning and not returning until well after dinner. She was never cruel to the child. Let me be clear on that. She was just efficient. I was free, reliable childcare. And I, lonely after my husband Arthur passed, mistook her exploitation for inclusion. I loved having my grandbaby. I would have done anything for that small bit of family. Then, about 8 months ago, the tone shifted. The casual Sunday dinners started to feel like strategy meetings. Mom, we're just worried about you. All alone in this big house. Daniel would begin, always glancing at Lena for his cue. The stairs aren't safe. Then came the suggestions. They wanted me to sell the house Arthur and I had paid off 20 years ago. They had found a 5-star luxury senior community near Phoenix. It's resort-style living. Mom, Lena chirped, showing me glossy photos on her phone. And it's near where we're planning to buy our winter home. We could visit you constantly. That's when I apparently started to lose my memory. Lena was the first to notice, of course. Oh, Eleanor, you left the kettle boiling dry again, she'd say with a sympathetic click of her tongue. I'd misplaced my keys, and after I'd searched the kitchen for 10 minutes, Lena would find them sitting on the hall table, right where I knew I had already looked. In front of her friends, she adopted a tone of weary affection. My mother-in-law is just getting so forgetful. I swear. We're going to need to look into guardianship soon. Bless her heart. 2 months ago, she brought me a new pill bottle. Dr. Evans changed your sleep medication, she announced. He said this new one is much better for women your age. The strange thing was, I hadn't seen Dr. Evans in half a year, but I was tired, and I trusted my son. So I took them. The fog didn't set in right away. It was gradual. I'd wake up feeling groggy, my thoughts moving like they were stuck in mud. I did feel confused. I did start to second-guess myself. Other things felt off. A bank document Daniel needed me to sign already had a signature on it that looked almost like mine, but not quite. "Oh, Mom, you signed that last week. Remember," Lena had said, gently taking the paper. "A few letters from my pension administrator, which I always kept in Arthur's old desk, vanished. You probably just filed them somewhere safe," Lena assured me. Then, Daniel suggested I see a specialist, a geriatric psychologist named Dr. Harlow. His office wasn't in the medical center. It was a small, dim room in a low-rent office park. Dr. Harlow seemed rushed. He asked me what day it was, who the president was, and to draw a clock. The consultation lasted maybe 15 minutes. But later that evening, I overheard Lena on the phone. "We just got back from her deep cognitive assessment," she was saying. "It's bad. The doctor was very concerned." I started to believe it. Maybe I was declining. Maybe this was just what happens. But one night, holding that little white pill, a flicker of the old head nurse stirred in me. I recognized the faint, bitter smell. It wasn't a sleeping pill. Or at least, it wasn't just a sleeping pill. A tiny, cold seed of suspicion, sharp as a fresh needle, finally took root. My gaze fixed on that grey document box under the SUV. Lena's kick had popped the latch. I could see the edge of a manila folder, crammed with the photocopies I'd started making 3 weeks ago. The copies were my first small act of defiance, made late at night on the old printer in the den, my hands shaking slightly. I'd started gathering them right after the seed of suspicion began to sprout. That seed had been watered just last night. I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard Lena's voice coming from the garage. She always took her important calls out there. The door was cracked. "No, the petition is solid," she was saying, her voice low and sharp. "We have Dr. Harlow's full assessment, plus my daily logs. We have all the proof of cognitive decline we need." A pause. "The court date is set. We just need to get her through the next 2 weeks without a scene." A court date, guardianship, proof of decline. The words had hit me like ice water. But even that wasn't the beginning. The real catalyst had come a week prior, in the form of a phone call on the old landline. "Is this Mrs. Eleanor Briggs?" a hesitant voice had asked. "This is she. My name is Naomi. I used to work at Silver Dunes, the assisted living facility." My hand tightened on the receiver. Silver Dunes. Not the resort near Phoenix Lena wanted, but a different one. "Ma'am, I'm calling because I think you might be in trouble. I was an intake coordinator. I got fired for asking too many questions." The woman, Naomi, explained that she'd seen a pattern elderly clients with significant assets, families in a hurry, and the same referring physician, a Dr. Harlow. "I saw your file," she'd said, her voice dropping. It was incomplete, just a preliminary transfer request, but it was flagged. Mrs. Briggs. It said, "Suspected dementia, recommended guardianship by adult child." I remember leaning against the wall, my heart hammering, but my voice came out thin and frail. "Oh my. Oh dear. I don't understand. I think you must have the wrong person. I'm quite all right." I played the part they were all casting me in. Inside. I was cold. I knew exactly what that designation meant. It meant I would lose my signature. I would lose my house, my accounts, my medical autonomy. Everything would fall to Daniel and Lena. Maybe, Naomi said, sounding unconvinced by my performance. But I reported Silver Dunes and Dr. Harlow to the State Health Department. The investigation is moving at a snail's pace. They have money. They have lawyers. Your name came up, and then the file was pulled the next day, completely scrubbed. It felt wrong. I should go, I'd whispered. Wait. If you feel like you're being pushed into something, she said quickly, meet me. Tomorrow. The Daily Grind coffee shop. Off the interstate. 10 a.m. Just, please. Be careful. I hung up. The next morning, I told Daniel and Lena that my bridge club was having a special breakfast outing. The lie came easily. Decades as a nurse teaches you how to maintain a calm, professional mask while chaos erupts just beneath the surface. Naomi was young, maybe 30, and looked terrified. She slid a folded piece of paper across the sticky table. I printed this from my work email before they locked me out, she said. It was an email chain. The sender was Dr. Harlow. The recipient was a senior partner at a law firm, Grantham and Lowe. The subject line was Case Briggs, E. My hands trembled as I read per our discussion. Intake assessment complete. Patient exhibits classic signs of cognitive slippage. Family is aligned. Attached is the initial list of confused behaviours reported by the daughter-in-law. We anticipate filing the full guardianship petition within 60 days. I scanned the attached list. Incident left stovetop burner on high for over an hour. That was the day Lena said she'd take care of lunch and then rushed me out of the kitchen. Incident unable to recall names of close relatives. I'd been groggy from the new pills, and she had asked me to name all 12 of my second cousins. Distortions. Lies. All meticulously documented. I left that coffee shop with my mind spinning, the cheap paper folded in my pocket, feeling heavier than a brick. I should have been devastated. I should have collapsed. But as I got into my car, the fog of the past few months finally, terrifyingly, burned away. All that was left was a cold, sharp focus. If they thought Eleanor Briggs was just a confused, frail old woman, a pile of clutter to be managed and discarded, they had profoundly misjudged the woman who had spent 30 years of her life triaging emergencies, reading liars, and navigating life and death before breakfast. They wanted a case to manage. I would give them one. The first step was the medication. That night, when Lena brought me the small paper cup with the white pill, I palmed it, letting my hand fall to my side. I pretended to drink the water, a dry swallow, and thanked her. Later, I flushed the pill down the toilet, in its place. I swallowed a vitamin D tablet from a bottle I kept hidden, one that was nearly identical in size and chalky texture. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The fog that had clouded my mind for weeks was noticeably thinner. My thoughts felt like my own again. I did the same thing the next night, and the next. By the third morning, the world was back in sharp focus. The grogginess, the confusion, the inability to grasp a simple thought, it all evaporated. It wasn't my age. It was the pill. My old nursing instincts took over. The part of my brain that still thought in terms of protocols and evidence. On the fourth night, I saved the pill. I waited until they were asleep, took it to the bathroom, and carefully ground it between 2 spoons. I scraped the fine white powder into a small, sterile envelope. The next day, I mailed it to ClearPath Diagnostics, a private lab in a neighboring state. I paid the fee with a money order and included a note, fabricating a story about being a retired physician checking on a compounded prescription for an elderly patient. I gave them a new, secure email address I had created at the public library. The results arrived 5 days later. My stomach clenched as I read the report. It wasn't one drug, it was two. A low-dose benzodiazepine, designed to induce calm and fogginess, combined with a potent anticholinergic agent. The second drug was the key. In elderly patients, it was known to significantly impair concentration and short-term memory, mimicking the early stages of dementia. It was a vicious, calculated cocktail designed to create the very symptoms Lena was so dutifully documenting. It was also difficult to detect in routine blood work unless a doctor knew exactly what to look for. Even before the results came in, I had started moving. I couldn't trust my local bank. Not when Daniel was on my main account. I took a bus 2 towns over, to a small credit union. I used my driver's license and social security card to open a new checking account, requesting all statements be paperless, sent to my new email. From then on, every trip to the grocery store, I'd ask for $200 cash back, every week. I made the trip and deposited the cash. I meticulously logged every transfer, every date, in a small black notebook that I kept tucked inside my nursing satchel, hidden under my bed. I now had the proof. I needed a weapon. I called the number Naomi had given me for the lawyer. His name was Marcus Hale. He wasn't some high-priced shark. He worked for the Elder Shield Legal Clinic, a non-profit dedicated to elder abuse cases. We met in a public park. I sat on a bench, looking like any other grandmother feeding pigeons, and I handed him the lab report and the photocopied email from Dr. Harlow. I watched Marcus read. He was young, but his eyes were sharp. He looked up from the papers, and his expression wasn't one of pity. It was one of focused anger. "Mrs. Briggs," he said, his voice quiet. "I thought this was going to be a standard asset grab. Greedy kids wanting the house. This is chemical restraint. This is criminal." He took a deep breath. "This is a much larger network." Marcus explained the guardianship process in Colorado. He showed me how Lena's falsified logs of concern and Dr. Harlow's expert assessment would be presented to a judge as overwhelming, objective evidence. "They are building a paper cage for you, Eleanor," he said. "They are counting on you being too confused and too weak to fight back." He leaned forward. "So, that is exactly who you must be. I want you to be the confused, frail woman they think you are. Let them get comfortable. Let them get arrogant. Give them enough rope, and they will hang themselves. We need to catch them in the act of pulling the petition." I nodded. I could do that. I went home, and while I played the part of the declining widow, I used the cash from my new account. I went online and ordered 3 tiny, voice-activated audio recorders, the size of a quarter. I paid with a prepaid debit card and had them shipped to Mr. Miller's house, telling him they were a birthday gift for my grandson. I wanted to keep secret. I knew from my hospital days how elderly patients, paranoid and frail, would hide things in plain sight. I used those same lessons. I taped one recorder under the lip of the kitchen island, where Lena always stood to make her calls. I tucked another behind the heavy drapes in the living room. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I looked at the silver hair, the deep lines etched around my eyes. They looked at this face and saw weakness. They saw an obstacle. They saw a payday. They were about to learn what a lifetime of experience truly meant. All right, I whispered to my reflection. If they want me to be confused, I'll be confused. Let's see just how dangerous a confused old woman can be. My performance was, I must admit, rather convincing. I began forgetting names. I would stand in the middle of the kitchen, looking perplexed, claiming I had forgotten why I came in. Lena watched me, her pity as artificial as her silk plants. "It's okay, Mum," she'd say, loud enough for Daniel to hear from the living room. "Forgetting things is perfectly normal. It just happens at this age." She treated me like a slightly broken appliance, one she was patiently waiting to replace. The patience, it turned out, was running thin. One evening, Daniel came home with a thick, leather-bound folder. He looked even more tired and stressed than usual. "Mum, I have some paperwork here," he said, avoiding my eyes and spreading the documents on the dining table. "It's just insurance updates. We need to make sure your assets are protected, you know, in case anything bad happens." His voice was hollow. I knew my son. He was a terrible liar. These weren't insurance papers. They were authorization forms, power of attorney, and, buried in the middle, a quitclaim deed for the house. I let my hand tremble as I picked up the pen he offered. "Oh, Daniel? There are so many pages. My eyes aren't what they used to be." I fumbled. "Where do I sign?" He pointed. I signed my name, but deliberately in the wrong spot, just above the witness line. "Oh, goodness, look at that. I've made a mess." I looked up at him, summoning every ounce of frail confusion I possessed. "Honey, could you just read this part to me again? The part about the asset protection." Daniel sighed, his frustration barely contained. He ran a hand through his hair. "Mum, it's standard. It just says—" He picked up the document. He didn't read what was written. He paraphrased, his voice low and rushed. "It just says that I can help you manage your accounts. You know, pay your bills, just so you don't have to worry about it." He was actively misrepresenting a durable power of attorney. What he didn't know was that a new, very small book on the shelf behind him, a tiny nanny cam I'd bought with the audio recorders, was capturing the entire exchange, the papers in his hand, and the deceptive explanation coming from his mouth. Later that night, after they were asleep, I went to the den. I scanned the pages he'd left behind, the ones I'd accidentally spilled water on before I could sign them correctly, forcing him to leave them to dry. I emailed the scans and the video file to Marcus. His reply came before dawn. "Eleanor, this is the smoking gun. This is willful deception of an elder. He's trying to get you to sign away your house. They're getting desperate." Lena's desperation manifested in her own work. She was accelerating her evidence gathering. She started staging incidents. I'd leave my keys on the counter, go to the bathroom, and return to find them missing. "Mum, you left your keys in the refrigerator again," she'd call out, feigning exasperation. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to the smell of burning. She'd turned the oven to 500 degrees with a dish towel sitting on the rack. "You can't do this. Eleanor, you almost burned the house down," she yelled, and I knew she was documenting every manufactured crisis in the small, red notebook she now carried everywhere. I found it 2 days later, tucked in her gym bag. I took it to my room, my hands moving fast, I photographed every single page. It was horrifying. My forgetfulness was detailed daily. Events I knew for a fact had never happened, alongside twisted versions of the ones she had staged. Every entry was written in a flowing, concerned script, a performance of a loving, overburdened caretaker. May 4th E, left front door wide open for 3 hours, wandering risk, a total fabrication. The final push came over dinner. Lena put on her most sympathetic face. "Mum," she said, placing her hand over mine. Daniel just stared at his plate. "We've been talking. We're so worried you're lonely here. So, this weekend, we want to take you to see Grand Oak Haven, that beautiful place near Phoenix." Her eyes were bright. "You'll have friends your own age, activities, round-the-clock care. You won't be so isolated." Daniel nodded mutely, refusing to look at me. This was it. The final step in their plan. I let a tear well in my eye. I let my chin quiver. "Oh, Phoenix. That's so sudden. But if you really think it's best..." I sniffled. "It does sound nice." "All right, dear. Let's go for a look-see." They both visibly relaxed, the tension drained from Daniel's shoulders. They thought I had finally given in, the confused old woman ready to be put away. They had no idea that I had already discussed this exact possibility with Marcus. That trip to Phoenix was never going to happen. At least, not the way they thought. That night, I stood in the hallway. My grandson, Leo, was asleep in his crib, his small face peaceful, unaware of the poison circulating in his own home. My anger was cold and hard, but looking at him, it clarified into a diamond-sharp resolve. I would burn them down for what they had done. Yes. But I would do it carefully. I would build a firewall. This fight was about me, and I would be damned if I let the fire I was about to start touch this innocent child. With the Phoenix trip looming, my schedule became tight. I told Lena I needed a full morning for a follow-up appointment with my cardiologist. Instead, I took a bus downtown to Marcus's office at the Elder Shield Clinic. There, in a quiet, sunlit room, I signed a new, ironclad, durable power of attorney, revoking any previous versions. It named Marcus Hale as my sole legal representative and, in a move Marcus called a smart defensive line, it appointed my neighbour, Mr. Miller, as an independent third-party supervisor in the event of any dispute regarding my care or assets. From there, I went to a large, impersonal bank branch in central Denver, one I had never used. I still had my original driver's license, the one issued before Daniel had helped me get a new state ID and quietly made himself a co-signer on my main accounts. Using that older license, I opened a safe deposit box. I placed inside it the original deed to my house, a new will I had drafted with Marcus that left everything to my grandson in a trust managed by Mr. Miller and, most importantly, a small USB drive. On that drive were copies of every recording, every photograph of Lena's red notebook, the lab report, and the video of Daniel trying to trick me into signing away my home. My last stop was to see Mr. Miller. I caught him while he was watering his roses. I kept the story simple. "Mr. Miller," I said, my voice low. "I am having a serious disagreement with my children about my house. They believe I am not fit to live alone." His face tightened. He remembered Lena's glare. "I don't need you to intervene," I continued. "But I need a favor from a friend. this weekend. Things might get complicated. If you see any unusual activity over here, an ambulance, or perhaps the police, I need you to stay inside and just film it with your phone. That's all. I handed him a sealed envelope. If that happens, or if you don't see me for more than a day, please call the number inside. He looked at the envelope, then at me, and nodded slowly. You can count on me, Eleanor. The day before our scheduled tour, Marcus made his move. He contacted the State Adult Protective Services. He didn't demand an emergency welfare check, which he knew might tip them off. Instead, he presented a high-level summary of the case, a pending fraudulent guardianship petition, evidence of chemical restraint, and a conspiracy to liquidate assets. He submitted the lab report and the email from Dr. Harlow as preliminary proof, requesting quiet surveillance and an open file. He was logging the threat before it exploded. The morning of the trip, the atmosphere in the house was thick with anticipation. As Lena was rushing me to get my bag, her phone rang. I was standing in the hallway, pretending to look for my glasses, and I heard her side of the conversation. Her voice, usually sharp, became slick and professional. Yes, this is she. A cash offer. Yes, that's significantly above asking. A pause. The only complication is a family matter, a guardianship hearing. But our lawyer says it should be settled very, very soon. It was a beautiful performance. She didn't know she was speaking to an associate from Marcus's firm, who was recording every word, confirming her financial motive to remove me. After she hung up, the energy in the house shifted from tense to frantic. Daniel, she hissed. We have to get this done. That was a serious offer. Daniel, who I later learned from Marcus's investigator was deep in debt from a failed crypto investment and a bad real estate deal, just nodded, his face pale. Whatever your lawyer needs, just sign it. Lena, get it done. We got in the car. I had my smallest audio recorder, the one I'd saved, tucked into my pocket and switched on. We were about 20 minutes down the highway when I put my plan into motion. I gasped, clutching my chest. Oh, no, 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 no! What is it now? Mom! Lena snapped, looking at me in the rearview mirror. My pills. My heart medication. I think I left the blue bottle on the kitchen counter. Oh, Daniel, we have to go back. I can't be without them. Lena's face contorted with rage. Are you serious? You can't be serious? Please, Lena. I whimpered. My heart. Daniel, ever the nervous one, made the decision. We have to go back. Lena, just turn around. As we pulled back onto our street, I saw it. A plain, dark sedan, parked 3 houses down. It was unmarked, but it had government plates. It was the APS quiet surveillance car Marcus had arranged. They wouldn't know it. But I would. We pulled into the driveway. Lena was seething. I waited until Daniel cut the engine. Then I let myself break down. I started to cry, a full-body, gasping sob. I can't remember anything. I can't even remember the date. What's happening to me? That's when Lena finally broke. Her mask of the caring daughter-in-law disintegrated. Stop it, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the small car. Just stop. You're acting like a child. I can't deal with this anymore. You're like a goddamned 3-year-old. It was all there, captured perfectly by the recorder in my pocket. I let my sobs quiet down as I got out of the car. My eyes went to the curb, where the large green trash bins stood waiting for pickup. They were overflowing. I saw the corner of Arthur's old leather satchel sticking out, the one Lena hadn't even bothered to throw in the pile on the lawn. She had just trashed it. All those worthless old things. My clutter. My life. I looked at the bin, then back at the house where my son and his wife were fuming, and I felt nothing but the cold, clean satisfaction of a match being struck. The Phoenix trip was, of course, postponed. Lena claimed my episode in the car proved I was not stable enough to travel. The real escalation, however, came that evening. Lena announced a family meeting at 8 p.m. sharp. The guest of honor was a woman named Mrs. Foster, a sharp-looking lawyer from Grantham and Lowe, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. They gathered in the living room, the one where my hidden recorder was already nestled behind the drapes. Mrs. Foster set out a thick stack of documents on the coffee table. Her voice was syrupy, laced with condescension. "Eleanor," she began, "Daniel and Lena are deeply concerned about your well-being. This current living situation, it's just not sustainable." Lena dabbed at a dry eye. "We're trying to avoid a public, messy court hearing. Mum, this is better." "This," Mrs. Foster said, tapping the top page, "is a voluntary guardianship agreement. It simply allows Daniel to step in and manage your medical and financial affairs. It's cleaner. It keeps things private, and it avoids the stress of a trial." I leaned forward, performing my confusion. A trial. What trial did I do something wrong? I looked at Daniel, who was studying the carpet. "No, Mom," he mumbled. "It's just to help." "But what does it mean, manage?" I asked. Mrs. Foster explained. I waited 30 seconds and asked the exact same question. "But what does it mean, manage?" Lena's jaw tightened. Mrs. Foster's plastic smile twitched. They explained again. I asked a third time. "She's having a bad night," Lena said quickly, her voice high and strained. "Sign here, dear." "Mrs." Foster said, pushing a pen and the signature page toward me. I took the pen, letting my hand shake. I made a long, jagged scratch that missed the signature line completely. Oh, goodness. I've spoiled it. My hand is so unsteady. I reached for my glass of water, my sleeve, accidentally, catching the rim. The water sheeted across the coffee table, soaking the first 3 pages of the agreement. "For God's sake," Lena hissed, jumping up. In the small chaos of Lena grabbing napkins and Mrs. Foster snatching at the dripping papers, my hand moved. I took the small digital recorder that looked like a pen from my pocket, clicked the nearly silent switch, and slid it onto the table. Half hidden by the fresh stack of documents Foster was now pulling from her briefcase. Mrs. Foster had lost all her synthetic patience. "Let's just be blunt. Eleanor," she said, her voice dropping the pretense. "You are clearly not capable of making these decisions. Once this petition is approved, whether you sign this or not, your son will have full authority to sell this house and distribute the assets as he sees fit. It is what's best." The little pen recorder, nestled under the folder, caught every single word. As I was about to ask, "What house? A firm?" heavy knock echoed from the front door. It was not a neighborly tap. Daniel froze. Lena looked up, annoyed. Who on earth could that be now? She yanked the door open. 2 people stood on the porch, a man and a woman, dressed in professional suits. They held up badges. Behind them, standing on the walkway, was a uniformed local police officer. "Good evening," the woman said, her voice calm and official. "We are from Adult Protective Services. We're here with Officer Mendez. We received a credible, time-sensitive report of concern regarding the welfare of the resident, Mrs. Eleanor Briggs, and potential forced financial contracts." The blood drained from Daniel's face. Mrs. Foster was instantly on her feet. Lena, however, was a chameleon. Her face crumpled into a mask of terrified relief. "Oh, thank God," she sobbed, clutching the doorframe. "Please, come in. We don't know what to do. She's a danger to herself. She leaves the stove on. She's wandering. She almost burned the house down. We're just trying to get her to sign for help." She gestured wildly at the papers on the table. I stayed seated, looking small and confused, staring at the wall. In their eyes, I was the perfect image of a senile old woman. The APS investigator, the woman, looked at Lena, then at the lawyer, then at me. "We will need to speak with everyone separately," she stated. "Officer, if you'll remain here, Mrs. Foster, we'll speak with you last. Mr. and Mrs. Briggs, we'll take you one at a time." "Eleanor," she said, turning to me with a softer tone, "would you mind speaking with my partner and me in the kitchen?" I nodded mutely, letting her help me to my feet. The moment the kitchen door swung shut, I stood up straight. I pulled the pen recorder from my pocket and switched it off. The confusion evaporated from my face. "My name is Eleanor Briggs," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Thank you for coming. I am the one who requested your presence." The investigator's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "I am being chemically restrained by my daughter-in-law, who is attempting to gain guardianship in concert with her lawyer to liquidate my assets," I said. I pulled out my phone, unlocked my secure email, and placed it on the table. "This is the lab report from ClearPath Diagnostics, identifying the unprescribed benzodiazepine and anticholinergic cocktail they are giving me. This," I opened my audio files, "is the recording of my daughter-in-law screaming at me in the car today. And this," I tapped the pen recorder, "is Mrs. Foster, recorded 5 minutes ago, admitting the goal is to sell my house." I had texted Marcus at 8:02, the moment Foster's car had pulled up. This was not a random welfare check. This was the trap springing. He had immediately forwarded my entire evidence package to this specific investigator and the local precinct, triggering an official, documented response. We returned to the living room. The air was electric. The investigator looked at Lena. "Mrs. Briggs, we need to discuss the medication you've been administering to your mother-in-law. Can you provide us with the prescription for the benzodiazepine?" Lena stared, her mouth opening and closing. The what? It's her sleeping pills. From the doctor." "Which doctor?" the investigator pressed. "Because her primary care physician, Dr. Evans, has no record of that prescription, and Dr. Harlow, whom your lawyer cited in the preliminary petition, is a psychologist. He has no authority to prescribe medication." Lena began to tremble, stammering about samples. Daniel was visibly sweating, staring at the damp, useless papers on the table. They were drowning, and they had only just realized the water was rising. I sat quietly on the sofa, watching the woman who had called me Clutter fall apart. The deep, aching wound of my son's betrayal was still there, but it was now wrapped in something else. It was the cold, clean, and strangely light feeling of the balance of power finally and irrevocably shifting back to me. The guardianship hearing went forward 3 weeks later. By the time of the APS visit, the petition was already filed, and with an active elder abuse investigation now attached to the case, Daniel and Lena couldn't withdraw it. They were trapped in the very legal maneuver they had set for me. The courtroom was cold. Mrs. Foster, looking impeccably professional, stood and addressed the judge. She painted a tragic picture of Eleanor Briggs, a vulnerable senior in the grips of a rapid cognitive decline. She held up Lena's infamous red notebook as a loving daughter's meticulous, heartbreaking log of my failures. She played 2 short video clips on the court monitor. It was me, filmed on Lena's phone, looking disoriented and sluggish, struggling to name the day of the week. It was footage from the peak of my drugging. "As you can see, Your Honor," Foster concluded, her voice thick with false sympathy. "Mrs. Briggs is a clear and present danger to herself." Then Marcus Hale stood up. He was calm, almost academic. "Your Honor," he said, "we agree that Mrs. Briggs was in danger, but not from herself." He started with the evidence. He submitted the lab report from ClearPath Diagnostics. "This," he said, "is what was truly causing the confusion Your Honor just witnessed. Not dementia, but an unprescribed, off-label cocktail of a benzodiazepine and an anticholinergic agent, administered to Mrs. Briggs without her knowledge or consent by her daughter-in-law." A murmur went through the courtroom. He then played the audio, not the short, edited clips, but the full recordings. The first was from the pen recorder. We all heard Mrs. Foster's voice, sharp and impatient. "After this petition is approved, your son will have full authority to sell this house and distribute the assets." Mrs. Foster turned a shade of pale grey. Marcus played the next file. It was Lena, from the kitchen recorder. "We have to get more evidence for the court." Her voice hissed. "If she has a few more bad days from the pills, Harlow's report will look even stronger." Next, Marcus called the APS investigator to the stand. She was concise. She described the frantic, chaotic scene she entered. She described Lena's dramatic performance of a long-suffering caregiver. And then she described her private interview with me, 10 minutes later. "The woman I spoke to in the kitchen," the investigator said, "was not the woman in those videos. Mrs. Briggs was lucid, precise, articulate, and presented a clear timeline of the events. The contrast was one of the most stark I have ever witnessed in my career." But Marcus wasn't done. "The defense calls Naomi Clark," he said. Naomi, the young woman from the coffee shop, walked nervously to the stand. Mrs. Foster and Lena both stared, clearly having no idea who she was. Naomi testified about her work at Silver Dunes. She described a pattern, a pipeline. "It was Dr. Harlow," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He would assess elderly clients who had assets. Then he would refer them to specific law firms, like Grantham and Lowe, to expedite guardianship. The families would get the assets, and the law firm and the facility would get a new client to bill. Dr. Harlow got a referral fee. I saw Mrs. Briggs's file flagged for this exact process." The air left the room. This wasn't just a greedy family. This was a network. When Marcus called Daniel to the stand, my son looked broken. He tried to stick to the story, but under Marcus's precise questioning, he unraveled. Finally, he just snapped. "I didn't know what else to do," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I owed so much money, The crypto, the real estate deal. It was all collapsing. I was going to lose everything. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I just wanted to save my family. Mom. It sounded pathetic. The excuse of a child, not a man. Cornered. Lena tried to fight. When it was her turn, she was pure venom. She blamed everyone. I was just doing what Daniel told me to do. She shrieked. He was the one with the debt. I was just following our lawyer's advice, Mrs. Foster told me to keep the notebook. Is that so? Marcus asked quietly. He played one last recording. It was Lena, alone, talking into her phone, seemingly leaving herself a voice memo. It was from the recorder under the kitchen island. Memo, she said. Need to stage another accident tomorrow. Maybe the oven. The forgetting names thing isn't working fast enough. Maybe I should ask Daniel to see if Harlow can up the dose. Lena went silent. She had just implicated herself as the primary architect. The judge, a woman with piercing eyes, held up her hand. This hearing on the petition for guardianship is paused, she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. This court is now referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and felony elder abuse against Ms. Lena Briggs, Mr. Daniel Briggs, and potentially Mrs. Foster and Dr. Harlow. The room erupted in whispers. A simple family drama had just become a criminal conspiracy. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Marcus. We're done for today, he said. We stood up. I didn't look at Daniel. I couldn't. I walked straight out of the courtroom, my back rigid. Mr. Miller was waiting by the main doors, his face set with concern. He just nodded at me, a silent show of support. As we pushed through the doors into the main hallway, I was blinded by a flash. A local news reporter, clearly tipped off about the criminal referral, shoved a microphone in my face. Mrs. Briggs, can you comment on the allegations against your son? Marcus pushed us through the crowd, but I saw the cameras. I realized, as we stepped into the cold afternoon air, that the court battle might be over, but getting justice, real justice, was only halfway done. The legal battle was one thing, the social fallout was another. I refused the requests for on-camera interviews, the ones that wanted a tearful victim. Instead, Marcus arranged for me to speak, anonymously, to an investigative reporter at a local Denver station. They put my voice through a modulator and showed my hands, folded in silhouette. They told the story of Mr. and Mrs. X and their attempt to medically and legally erase a parent for profit. The story ran on the 10 o'clock news. In a town like Ridgefield, anonymous doesn't last long. The details were too specific. The blurred-out image of the house on our street was recognizable. The whispers behind curtains, the ones that had followed my public humiliation, changed. Mr. Miller told me the Neighborhood Watch email list was lighting up. The looks I received were no longer simple curiosity. They were a mixture of deep pity and a new, sharp indignation on my behalf. The public shaming was a blade with two edges. The first edge struck Lena, an online investigative blog, digging into the court referral, published the names involved: Dr. Harlow, Grantham and Lowe, and Lena Briggs, within a week. The small local brands that paid Lena to promote their vitamin supplements and activewear began to sever ties. Her influencer career, built on a curated image of aspirational wellness, evaporated. The second edge struck Daniel. His employer, Brightcap, a company obsessed with its public image, placed him on indefinite administrative leave, citing an ongoing review of ethical conduct. Financially, the walls were closing in. The court, pending the criminal investigation, issued a temporary freeze on any transactions involving my property. This was catastrophic for Daniel. It turned out his bad real estate deal involved using my paid-off house as collateral for a high-interest bridge loan, a move he'd managed with forged signatures. With the house now flagged by the court, his creditors, who were sharks, came calling. The pressure on him became immense. Marcus and I then filed our own civil suit, not just for legal fees, but for significant emotional distress. And, most importantly, we petitioned for a permanent protective order barring Lena from ever contacting me or managing any asset in my name again. That's what brought Daniel to my door. I was staying at Mr. Miller's in his spare room. I saw Daniel standing on the porch through the peephole. He looked thin, his face grey with stubble. I let him in, but I remained standing in the entryway. He didn't waste time. He wept. "Mum, please, you have to tell them to stop. The DA is talking about jail time." He was sobbing, a pathetic imitation of the little boy he used to be. It was Lena. It was all her idea. The pills, the notebooks. She pushed me. I just wanted to fix the money. I listened, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I felt a flicker of the old maternal instinct, the urge to soothe him. I crushed it. She may have lit the match. "Daniel," I said, my voice flat. "But you held me down while she did it. You brought the papers into my house. You lied to my face. But I'm your son," he cried. "And I am your mother," I replied, opening the door. "You made your choice. You chose where you stood. I cannot change that for you." Lena's attempt came 3 days later, via email. It was a long, rambling manifesto. She blamed her poor childhood. She blamed the pressures of social media. She blamed Daniel for his financial weakness. It all culminated in one desperate line: "I just wanted a better life for my family." Is that a crime? I read the email twice. I thought about the fog of the medication, about the terror of feeling my own mind slip away. I thought about my life's memories being kicked under a car. I replied with only one sentence. The crime isn't wanting a better life, Lena. The crime is being willing to push someone else off a cliff to get it. My revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about prevention. I began working with the Elder Shield Legal Clinic. I gave them permission to use my name and my case file, the lab reports, the audio, the legal motions as a training module. My story became a case study for new lawyers, for social workers, and for geriatric medical students. A textbook example of how to spot sophisticated, organized elder abuse. But I don't sleep soundly. There is no triumph in this. Justice is not the same as peace. The rage I felt has cooled into a chronic, dull ache. I won, but I lost my son. I look at photos of my grandson, Leo, and I wonder what will become of him. A child raised by a wolf and a fool. I saved my house. I saved my autonomy. But I lost the one thing I thought was unconditional. That is the price of this victory. It is a cost I pay every single day. The final sentencing hearing was almost an anticlimax. The district attorney had pursued the charges aggressively. Lena was found guilty of felony elder abuse and fraud. Daniel, who had cooperated fully after his initial collapse, accepted a plea for a lesser charge of conspiracy. Mrs. Foster. I learned, had surrendered her license to practice law to avoid her own criminal trial. I was invited to give a victim impact statement. I walked to the podium, not in the suit Marcus had suggested, but in my old nursing uniform, starched and white. I looked directly at the judge, not at them. I did not cry. My voice was steady, the voice I used to use on the ward. For 3 months, I said, I was made to feel like I was going insane. I was drugged in my own home, made to doubt my own mind, my own memories. I was told I was a burden, a danger. I paused, then turned my head slightly toward Lena. And then, I was thrown out of my home like garbage, my life's possessions tossed onto the sidewalk for my neighbors to see. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since that day. You told me, I said, my voice dropping but cutting through the silence, that I only bring clutter. Lena stared back, her face a mask of defiant emptiness. You were wrong, I told her, my voice rising just enough to fill the room. The only clutter in my life was your bottomless greed. The room was absolutely still. The judge was not lenient. She spoke of the violation of trust, the calculated cruelty. Lena received a custodial sentence 5 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 3. She was also permanently barred from ever working in any capacity related to healthcare or senior advocacy. Daniel received 5 years of probation. He was ordered into a financial rehabilitation program and, in a turn of judicial irony, was sentenced to 2,000 hours of community service, working in the kitchens of a state-funded long-term care facility. I won. But the victory felt heavy. Regarding my grandson, Leo, I made a choice. I would not allow Daniel's poison to infect his son. Marcus set up a strict, supervised visitation schedule. Daniel could see his son twice a month, at a neutral third-party facility, with a social worker present. He would not be cut off, but he would never, ever be left alone with him. I went back to the house in Ridgefield one last time. It felt alien, cold. I couldn't stay there. But I wouldn't let it go to some soulless investor, the kind Lena had been courting. I put it on the market for well below its value, with a single, strange condition. I sold it to a young resident physician and her husband, a teacher. The condition was this: the small storage room in the basement, where I'd hidden my nursing satchel, was to remain untouched as a memory room, and a small plaque was to be hung by the door. It just reads, "Elder abuse thrives in silence. Speak up." With the proceeds from the sale and the compensation from the civil suit, I left Colorado. I bought a small, clean condominium in a town I'd always dreamed of, Harbor's Reach, on the Oregon coast. The air smells of salt and pine. I spend my mornings walking on the beach and 3 afternoons a week volunteering at a local legal aid clinic, helping other seniors read the fine print. About 1 year later, Daniel came to Harbor's Reach. He appeared at my door on a rainy Tuesday, holding Leo's hand. He was not with Lena, who was still incarcerated. He looked older. The weakness in his eyes had been replaced by a deep, permanent sadness. He apologized. Not the blubbering excuses of the courtroom, but a quiet, hollow statement of fact. I know sorry doesn't mean anything. Mom, he said, staring at the floor. I just wanted you to know, the probation, the community service, that's not the punishment. The punishment is having to look at myself in the mirror, and knowing I will have to look my son in the eye one day and tell him what I did to you. I let him stay for 1 hour. When they left, I stood at my new front door. In the corner of my entryway sat my old, worn suitcase, the very one Lena had thrown onto the curb. It was no longer clutter. It was just a bag, ready for a weekend trip if I chose. I thought about the future. I thought about Leo growing up. I thought that if, one day, decades from now, his future wife ever looked at me and said, "You bring clutter," I would just smile. I would tell her I was once the storm that cleaned out the people who treated the elderly like trash. If you can't handle a little mess, child, this house isn't for you. House. I closed the door, the click of the latch sounding final. I was not hiding. I was not forgotten. I was, finally, free. I was no longer anyone's clutter. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please share your thoughts and where you are in the comments below. We can all chat. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.